Object snaps, they're not commands. Very important. Okay, object snaps are not commands. They only run during commands. So they're in between. They run during that period of where. When AutoCAD asks me where do I want to put something, okay, that's their purpose. And they have two basic modes. One is referred to as running, and the other one is one-time use. So if it's a running object snap, that means it's always on. That means AutoCAD is always looking for it. And we can alter that under those drafting settings. The one-time use is activated in one of two methods. So either a 3-letter shortcut, or you can do a shift right click from the mouse, again, when you're in space. So some examples: endpoint, midpoint, intersection, center, quadrant, tangent, perpendicular. You see those 3 letters? Those are the letters that you would type in. So let's flip back to AutoCAD. Okay, let's create a line. L for line, L spacebar. I click a point. I don't need an assistive tool, but what if I wanted to attach directly to here? Okay, there's that assistive tool kicking in, the end point of that line. Yeah, I want to connect there. So while it's going, I click it. And I'm moving around in space. AutoCAD is looking for some object snaps for me, helps me manage space. And there's a midpoint. Okay, there's that green triangle to indicate that that is a midpoint. And I can draw from that midpoint to this midpoint. I could go back down to this endpoint. I could hit spacebar, complete my line command, and I've got all my line work all connected, and I don't need to worry about it. But how do we alter some of those settings? DS. So let's go into DS. And if we click on Object Snap, there's my list. So factory mode actually has midpoint turned off. What if we return back to factory mode? Okay, we could do that. So object snaps are currently on, function key 3. These are the running object snaps. So I'm going to click OK. Now let's try to do the same thing that we did before. Let's just delete some of this line work. And we'll do L for line. I'm going to click a spot in space. There's an assistive tool. That's great. I click it. Now I want to go to the middle of this line, and I cannot. Okay, now I just turned it off. So that's why it's not working. So if I zoom in a little bit, pan up, you can sort of see it either goes to the top or the bottom. I'm not getting that midpoint. So let's say I wanted that midpoint, and I didn't want to go back to drafting settings. Remember those 3 letters? I could type in MID. Okay, those were the 3 letters of midpoint. And now look what happens. When I go here, there's that midpoint. But now that I've selected it once and I want this midpoint, I can't get it. Okay, it was a one-time use of midpoint. And it's very important with AutoCAD because sometimes with our object snaps, you only want to use them one time. My other method of getting there, instead of typing MID, is to do shift and right click. And when I do shift and right click, there's my list. So I can pick midpoint again. So I could select this midpoint and go to that endpoint, spacebar, complete that command. So these object snaps, when we look at them, you might be inclined to think, well, why can't I just turn all of these on and have them all running? Now, if you do that, so many of these overlap geometrically that you're going to get your object snaps kicking in, and you're not going to know which one it is kicking in. And it's going to confuse you more than it's going to help you. So you want to be careful about which one of these you turn on. Okay, read them, think about the geometric process behind them, and think about whether it's suitable. And the question you want to think about is, if you only need it one time, then you could simply shift right click or type it. Whereas something like an endpoint, you're always going to want, you may want a midpoint running all the time as well, because sometimes the center or the middle of lines is what you're going to want to catch constantly. Layers are actually used in your drawings to manage objects, right? So it's sort of the top of a food chain. It's a hierarchy. It's sort of a management command. So colors and thickness can identify a layer. So if I see a certain color, I can identify what layer that's on. Even in this simple drawing that I have, I can see that I've got different colors. I've got yellow and I've got white. And this is an indicator to me of that principle. So by me looking at it, I can identify which layers they belong to. Line types can be added, but you need to load them first. Transparency and plotting can also be controlled through the layer manager. You can only ever draw on your current layer, and you can only be on one layer at a time. So if, as I mentioned before, if you have used it correctly, you're keeping your objects on layers, it's your visual identifier. And it's especially important in complex drawings. Layer 0 is unique. It has some special properties. And it's the only factory layer you get in ACAD.DWT. And here's an odd thing. Once you've created your layers, you should not draw on layer 0. So let's flip back to AutoCAD and let's just take a quick look at that. If I click down on my layer list, okay, I've only got layer 0. Now if I go over to here, one of the exercise files, if I click on this drop-down list, there's 4 layers. But this is what's called a quick view. If I actually want to see the layer manager itself, I just need to click here and bring up the layer manager. So if I bring up the layer manager, this is actually the entire layer manager. This gives me my layer names, my properties associated with the layers, and it's all displayed in this nice view. Now, if you've got yours in factory mode, this is probably what you're getting, you know, something that's all squished together, a couple of columns, you can barely read them. I'm sure a number of you have this problem right now. So if I went on any of these column headers and right-clicked, I can choose maximize all columns. Now, in order to adjust this window, with AutoCAD, this is really finicky. AutoCAD has very, very tiny, thin window frames. So it's sort of tricky to get there. It can be done, but there it is. Okay, when you get that little double arrow, you can shrink or adjust your window. So you may need to do that first because maybe your layer manager opened up this way with all the squished columns. So make sure you've got yourself some screen real estate, open it up, and then you can right click and you can choose maximize all columns. So if we look at this information, we get the name for our layer. We've got this very first column here called status, and then there's a little check mark beside one of the names. So in this case, this is the objects line layer. And if I close this, this is my current layer. That's what that indicates. That check mark means that I'm going to be drawing on my object line layer. So if I did L for line, that's the layer I'm on, and I click it and spacebar, it's white and it has a certain thickness. So let's look back at that. So if I look at objects, you can see that the color is set to white, the line type is continuous, and there is that line weight, the thickness that goes with it. So on these columns, there's on or off. the first column, freeze or thaw. You can also lock a layer. So right now I've got this ano layer locked. Well, what does that mean? So my ano layer is yellow. So if I go back to my drawing, here's that yellow. And even with my crosshairs, I get a lock on there. So if I ever just want to open up and I don't want to click here, the shortcut is LA. LA gets you the layer manager. And then if I deselect this lock, watch what happens to this. Okay, I can select this, it becomes unlocked, it becomes a lot brighter. And now I can actually highlight it and I could erase it. Okay, I lock that layer so that you can't easily erase some of my little pointers to help you draw those circles. That's why it was put in place. You can also choose to print or not to print. That's what this is. So if we look at this information about line types, let's say, for example, we looked at our object line layer. I've got continuous. I could change this. Now, how do you change a line type? By default in factory mode, you only get continuous. I need to load a line type. So if I'm going to load a line type, here's my choices. I've got a center line. I've got a dashed line somewhere here. Dashed line is something that's common. I click OK. I've loaded it, but you see it's still not been selected for this layer. So I need to load it, and then I select it, then I click OK. Look at what happens to my drawing. This is immediate. I've got dashed lines that show up for my line work. Okay, it's immediate. That's kind of cool. So if we go back to that layer manager, you can see I've got a line type loaded as dashed. I've also got a thickness or its line weight, so I could adjust how thick these lines are. I could change that property right here. And it's in here, this layer manager, that we need to do this, okay? We want to make our changes in here. Now, what if I wanted to add a new layer? I could just click this little icon up here, or Alt-N. So if I click that, the default AutoCAD comes up with for a name is Layer 1. So I could type in if I wanted, and a lot of times we see caps used for layer names, and there my columns are now squished. So what could I do? I could right click on here and do a maximize all columns. Now I was on objects and I created a new layer. So when I created furniture, all the properties of the layer that I made that was new gets copied into the new layer. So if I wanted to change any of these properties, I can do that. So I could change the color. Now, when we talk about colors, we want to use our basic colors along the bottom, 1 through 9. And then if we have 2 reds, the second red will be up here somewhere. Always use these primaries first. They're the low numbers. So if I wanted this to be purple or magenta, I could do that. And now I've got a different, let me just change this maybe to continuous, change some of the settings, change my thickness. And I've got a furniture layer. So what if I wanted to do a rectangle for a desk? Okay, well, if I type in REC, right, I'm not going to get it. I'm going to get this. That's because I'm not on the right layer. I need to flip over to my furniture layer. And now if I type in REC and then click from one to the other, I will get that color. So by having layers organized with colors and thickness and line type, when it comes to complex drawings, you can identify an object and identify the layer that it's on if you know this information. If you know the color and the name of the layer, you can identify it in your drawing. And this can be incredibly powerful, okay? Now, what if you wanted to create a whole bunch of layers in one shot? You could. You could do, once you've got this prompt for layers, you could hit enter And then you can click enter again, enter, 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 enter. I'm just hitting my enter key over and over again. And you can populate many layers very quickly. And you can see they all inherit the properties of the layer that they started from. We can see that there's this thing called transparency. So these assistive tools are green. So if I double click this, that's the same as making it current. So if I did L for line and I was on this layer, you can see that the green is kind of dimmed down. It's 50%. So maybe I want this green to be a lot brighter. I could go back up to my layer manager and change this to a 0. And by doing so, I have a wonderful, nice, sharp green look in that line. Now, one of the things that I'm not a big fan of with AutoCAD is, we manage layers, we manage our colors, all these things through here. And your eyes might be drawn to this. Okay, don't ever use or change any of these. Leave these in factory mode. Factory mode, if you look at these words, by layer, all of them say that. So there's your color, there's your thickness, and there's your line type, all set to by layer. That means let this manage the layer. Okay, when you do it here, you're overriding. And I don't want to see that in any of your submissions. Do not override your colors. It's just not good in terms of your desirable outcomes. So avoid that at any cost. It is most unfortunate that it sits here right on the ribbon, but it is what it is. Always manage your colors and the other aspects that are available here through this layer manager. Always manage it that way. So for assignment number 1 and layers, going forward on all future assignments, now that you're going to use this template that you created for assignment number 1, everything needs to go on the appropriate layer. So your objects go on the object line layer, text goes on the text layer, the future title block will go on the borderline layer. So if you don't follow along with these rules, it is going to reduce your grades. You're going to get a comment from me that things are not on the right layers. Assigning the correct object to the correct layer is an essential AutoCAD skill. If you're confused about what layers to use for our course, you ask me.